difference between an Islamist group and a jihadist group is that their audience is different. This is a really important thing because for a long time, I think Americans had a hard time understanding how it is that, Al-Qaeda is made up of engineers and doctors and lawyers and, middle-class people with great education, with PhDs, some from American universities. There was always this conception, amongst certain people that, well, terrorism is what poor people do. If you're poor and if you've got nothing to live for, then you become a suicide bomber. And then we would see these fairly wealthy, fairly educated people, strapping bombs to their bodies. But it is a very important distinction because the truth is that the membership of these two communities, an Islamist organization which is concerned with nationalism, with local issues, and a jihadist organization which is concerned with global ideas, which is utopian, are necessarily going to draw different people. I mean, let's be honest here. If you have the wherewithal to think about such things as global transformation, you're probably in a different educational category than other people. Whereas a group like Hamas, which is an Islamist organization, their membership is going to be the poor, the deprived, people who feel like they've got absolutely nothing left, that they're fighting not for some global utopian world. They couldn't care less about the rest of the world. They want to feed their families. They want to stop living in a garbage heap that used to be their home. They want immediate results. And so it's only natural that you get poorer people, disadvantaged people, marginalized people who tend to join Islamist groups. We've already said there's no way to deal with jihadism. The militants, you find them, you kill them. That's it. They can't be talked to. They can't be compromised with. They are fighting a war over their very sense of self. And if that's what's at stake, what's to negotiate? On the other hand, with Islamism, there is plenty to deal with. There's plenty to talk about. First of all, you recognize that part of the appeal of these groups is socioeconomic. And so development plays a huge role in this. Economic development, social development. But let's not forget about political development. Look, George Bush was right. The way to moderate radical behavior is through political participation. He had the right idea, just really, really lousy way of doing it. But when you live in a society in which you feel as though your aspirations, your ideals, your values are actually taken seriously by the government, when you feel like you actually have a voice in the marketplace of ideas, then it's only natural that the appeal of radical movements will tend to go away. There is no better example of this than Turkey. Turkey has a terrorism problem. It's just it's the secularists who are blowing things up. It doesn't really have a jihadist problem at all. Yes, there are these pockets of religious radicals in Turkey, but they have no appeal at all. Why? Because for the vast majority of Turks who have had until last year, 7 consecutive years of record economic growth, who have jobs, and who feel as though they now have a government that actually values some of their own ideals, their own principles, there is no appeal to radicalism. So socioeconomic issues, that's always important. There's no question about it, but it can't stop there. Without political development, these movements will remain radicalized. If the only free space in society is the mosque, then of course opposition to the government is going to be religious opposition, and it can be very quickly, very easily radicalized. So those are the real key. Promote the kind of political participation that the Bush administration thought of, but did a lousy job in actually promoting. And also continue the socioeconomic development in the region. I think in that regard, Obama is wanting. He's done a good job of making certain promises about social development, economic development, but I don't think the word democracy has left his mouth in 16 months. So, and I understand that. In some ways, democracy has been tainted by the way in which it was promoted by the previous administration. It's now a byword for hypocrisy and chaos. But think back to that talk that he gave in Cairo, the address to the Muslim world. He mentioned democracy once in that 90-minute speech, just once. Really, really a shame on him. But that one mention got the largest and the loudest applause line of the entire talk. This is serious. Muslims in these anti-democratic societies want what everybody wants. They want a say in their government. They should be given that say.
Mr. Aslan, my name is Nasir Jalal. I'm from Pakistan. I would like to hear your views on the Taliban who were given a chance to govern in Afghanistan and also in Pakistan, yet they failed. What are your views on that?
Okay, first of all, the Pakistani Taliban and the Afghanistan Taliban are two absolutely different, unrelated organizations. Unfortunately, we refer to them both as Taliban, and so that sometimes gives us the impression that they are related in some way. They are not related. The Afghani Taliban and the Pakistani Taliban, two completely different groups. In Afghanistan, of course, they weren't given an opportunity to rule. They took over. And they took over, and we all saw the mess that they made, and good riddance to that regime. Pakistan is a little bit more complicated because the ISI, the Pakistani Intelligence Inter-Service Agency, has essentially paid off the Taliban for decades. They've used the Taliban in their war against India. They've used it to get greater influence in Afghanistan. And every time that the Taliban made more and more demands of the Pakistani government relented to the point where they gave them complete autonomy in the Swat Valley. And we saw the results of that. This is not an organization, the Pakistani Taliban, that is interested in just a little small piece of that country. They want it all, and they will not stop until they get it all. And what Pakistan should be commended for is that they have finally realized that the military has finally realized that their enemy is not in this border on the south called India. I mean, 250,000 Pakistani troops on the border of India, Pakistan. What are they waiting for? They really think that any minute now India is going to attack? Meanwhile, the entire country is being gobbled up from the north. So, good for Pakistan. They finally recognize what the problem is, and they have had remarkable success in beating back the Pakistani Taliban. In Afghanistan, however, Taliban means something else completely. And in fact, we really need to talk about, Taliban as a heterogeneous group. It's composed of different tribes, different clans, different ethnic groups. There are some Taliban who are exactly what the name suggests, just students who are ultra-conservative but who have no interest in political power. Many of what people refer to themselves as Taliban are tribally affiliated. They just want to be left alone. A portion of the Taliban, if you believe David Kilcullen, who's portrayed as chief advisor, civilian advisor, if you believe him, about 9% of what we call Taliban has now completely abandoned its Islamist ideology and has married itself to Al-Qaeda. This is the Taliban primarily in the Northwest Frontier Province. In other words, they've ceased being Islamists and have become jihadists. They've ceased their nationalist ambitions and have now have these global ambitions. This is the Mullah Omar branch of the Taliban. But there's the Haqqani branch of the Taliban. Taliban in Afghanistan, you're talking about 5 different, major branches. And so the key for the new Afghan strategy, which again has just gotten started, but from what little we've heard so far, it seems to be bearing some fruit. It's way too early to see whether it's going to work or not. is to say, okay, there's actually 12 different clans who call themselves Taliban. How many of them are ideologically Taliban? And how many of them are just against America? How many of them just want autonomy? Well, we can talk to those groups. So that's the plan. We'll see. We'll see if it works. But it's a better plan than anything anyone else has had when it comes to Afghanistan thus far.